basically I already have commenters saying what should be said. And here's the thing. There needs to be a viewpoint and perspective added to everything. So in this perspective, we're going to presume that, let's say Tentacion is still alive. People want to know what would be the reason he would fake his death. Now, from what we've seen and also implications of what actually happened to him, I thought that would be something a lot of people may have figured out, but we're going to talk about it anyway. Now, what would be the motive for him faking his death, since a lot of people are mentioning it? Well, honestly, that's very simple. If you remember, if you watch any interviews he actually had going on, he had mentioned to the viewers that he had caught felonies previous in his teenage to leading into adult years. The one reason, well, think of what he had allegedly done and was about to be convicted of before this incident. His baby mother. That's crucial. That is a very star part of what the issue would be. Imagine that you have, let's say, even one felony, but I know he had like two. So presume that is the case. Say you're about to face a case with 3 felonies. Max, he could probably get 1 or 2 of them lowered to a misdemeanor in this same situation. But think about it logically. If he would get convicted of these 3 felonies on top of what he already done, he'd almost be done on freedom. What I'm saying is that what he was about to face in time was far more likely to be detrimental to his life. He'd be facing at least 25 years, presuming his other felonies weren't wiped, whether he was in his teenage years, early adult years or not. You're about to face 3 felonies at once. You would have to have the greatest lawyer in the world in order to even get those lowered, when there's photo evidence and you have, let's say, witnesses that have watched you brutalize someone. That would not have been good. These factors would have definitely led to lots of time for him, if not his freedom taken for potentially most of his adult life. That would be an easy reason for me to see why something like this could be falsified. Now, even if his baby mama wanted to take it back and wanted to see him have freedom, that wouldn't matter, being the photos. And when a case is initially given and pushed to prosecute, whether or not she prosecuted, I can guarantee you that officers and authority would have moved forward in the prosecution of this woman. And when I say that, I mean they would have fought on behalf of her. They wouldn't have let him get away with doing what he did to her, especially the fact she needed surgery and she had donations to do so. This would have been the perfect reason for him to fake it, because how do you avoid prison or jail? There's no way around it. Not in this situation, especially because you have photos, you have medical records, and then you also have investigators that did an investigation. So he was potentially facing 25 to I'm gonna say 35 years at least, even fighting the charges. There's no way he would have got a slap on the wrist for this. When it comes to another human being being victimized, especially if they lived through it and it came out in court they needed surgery, with domestic abuse laws and the current Me Too movement that's going on, there would have been no way for him to avoid major jail time. This situation would have potentially put everybody's favorite star in a prison cell for years and years. I mean, far more years than we've seen Bobby Shmurda and them work down. And that is because literally the victim lived. Here's the thing. You can fight a murder based off of circumstantial evidence, and you have a better chance of beating it than a living witness or living victim, because these factors play a part in the court. Again, it goes back to what I told you prosecution is going to do to the young men that they currently have. It's going to be a brash of character. Tentacion's earlier life shows a very dire character. Whether he's in need of attention or not, he had previous violent crimes that were felonious. This literally put him in a position to be prosecuted for many more years, because the way they're going to look at it is, okay, in his teenage years, he had felonies. He was an issue. Now he's still getting felonies. He's an issue. And it was 3 at once. You see, beating 1 felony is hard. But when you're fighting 3 at a time, he honestly would not have found a lawyer that was able to combat that. Let alone when the photos came out, there are not many lawyers that would even want to take a case of that nature, because they know that that's damning evidence. You have a living witness. That is why domestic abuse and things of that sort are looked at so harshly, because especially if you have a prior record, you will not get any mercy. And I'm pretty sure after seeing a few lawyers, because he had the finances, he realized that, and he said, there's no way I'm actually going to beat this case. That would be the perfect reason for me to fake that I'm not there. Who can avoid an indictment of that level except a dead man? Who can? There's no one. There's only one way out of something like that, and honestly, it would be to be deceased. So as we look at the case as it goes, that would make perfect sense of why people are presuming and alleging he may still be alive and he faked it. Because these things need to play out and look realistic. If they do not look realistic, it would have been even an investigation into a fake, let's say, setup, a situation. That would have been another charge. There's many different factors that play into a felony background. And that's what people need to understand. It's not a one route thing. It's not something that's as simple as left and right. This is literally something that gets investigated from A to B. And if you have any issues regarding the situation, you're not held in any innocence. So there would have been no route for him to claim he was a victim, nor a route for him to basically opt out of the situation. You're seen as someone who's involved in something of this magnitude. There would have been no mercy in a court case. He would have had no leeway, and there would have been very few lawyers that would even want to take a case of this nature. These are all prime factors that need to be examined when we're looking at how people are prosecuted and determined to be innocent or guilty. And this adds to the flavor of why he would be presumed in a situation of this nature to have made that decision. Because if you look closely, there would have really been no way out. He would have really had no situation that he could say, well, I feared for my life, or say he, had her back out of it. They still would have went forward with the case. There would have been no way he could beat it. But those are the major factors that play a part in us examining what actually happened. So if he did make that decision to try and get out, he would have had to seem deceased, or he would have had to literally have died to avoid the dire charges that were coming down. And that's why I understand when people say he did a Tupac, but remember, it wasn't for Tupac decisions or Tupac reasons. There's many viewpoints that can go into whether he's actually here or whether he would make a decision at that time, but it also would make sense why he's able to get out of it that way, even if we presume authorities are involved, because the people who are being arrested have very violent criminal past. So they could have been used as scapegoats for this instance, and he would have made himself available to get out of country, to get out of town, wherever he went. Presuming he's deceased, there's not reports against him that could say he's escaping court, because a man who's presumed deceased cannot stay in court. As we know, he's gone, and there's no longer anyone in his body or in his shape or in his position that could stand for the crime. See, a lot of times when a person commits a crime and they have multiple people, if one's deceased, all the charges are aimed at the last viable option. There's no viable options left. And that's what people need to understand. So these are also factors that can play into why people are saying he's yet alive. Because they knew he was facing a felony case with his baby mother. She could have potentially not wanted to see him persecuted, knowing she was about to have a child. But in the instance, the fact she had surgery and there was many different circumstantial evidence factors like photos, medical records, even surgery done to repair the damage he had committed and that she alleged he did, they would not back out a case like this. So a case of abuse, dealing with a violent assault would not be dropped because someone wanted it dropped. The state would go head forward with the prosecution without the person that wants to be in it. They'd get subpoenas to take her photos, her medical records, and all the evidence, and that would literally subjugate him to proper authoritative discipline. So he really couldn't escape that. If that was the case, he would have had no outing, no way to dodge it. And that is the answer for why and what the motive would be for him to do that. That's something I mentioned earlier. Remember, I told you he was facing felonies, and it seems he fell into an even worse situation. Well, to say that he set it up, that would be the motive, to avoid that situation, because a deceased man cannot face trial, and to move forward with his life while still paying the gratitude to his family. Now, is there a statute of limitations on something of the nature? I'm not sure. We would have to research and figure that out. But I do know that that would be the main motive I can see for him getting out of Dodge, and also why this setup would make most sense. And that's just, again, objective speculation of the why that would make the most sense in the time period, in the circumstance, and with the people involved around the case. This would all be the only proper way to avoid the dangers he was facing by authority. I want to know you guys' comments below. Let me know what you think about that ideology, whether you think there's another motive. If you think there's another reason, let me know. I read it all. I would be glad to hear it. But from my perspective and seeing what he was going through and what happened to him, that makes the most sense of why this situation would be him faking his death. All rights reserved.